This is called Location, Location, Location. It's really about relocation or staying. What should you do if you're an architect? How many architects are in the room? Raise your hand. How many church staff, pastor staff, or committee type people? That's a good blend. I am an architect in Dallas here, but we work all over the country, and we do churches for 40 years now, and we've relocated probably, I'd say, about maybe 150, 200 churches. A lot of them are real large churches, others are small, and we've seen churches stay and seen churches relocate and kind of got to see why they did it and that sort of thing. Jeff is a civil engineer, and we've worked together, not only as a consultant, but also he's been a chairman of a committee and my client in the past. But Jeff has an excellent civil firm that does a lot of really good work, and I know he's done relocation because he's done it with us and does a good job doing it right now, actually. So getting into this, and we need to move fairly fast because we're just thinking about, there are so many stories, and one of my problems is I can get off on some of these stories and take a lot of time and can't finish, so I don't want to do that. But it's really cool to see what has happened in the past and churches that have succeeded and how they've done that. And it's a blessing to see how God works in these churches. A lot of questions come up, and many of you may have this: should we stay, relocate? I know I'm a member and deacon at First Baptist Dallas, and over the years, I've been there since '65, and over the years, the church has considered many times relocating, and it may be that in the past, they should have not relocated, but maybe started a satellite church. But whoever heard of satellite churches then, you know? But looking back, that would have been a good thing. But it's a good thing they stayed downtown. So there's just a lot of questions that come up, and I hope we can hit some of those and help you. It starts with, I believe, the vision of the pastor. I really do believe God speaks through the pastor, the leader of the church, the under shepherd, to give direction as he seeks it. And it's important to the success of the project that the pastor does have conviction that he's got a vision and a direction from God. If that happens, it'll go so much more successfully. Again, my church is in the process of recreating its campus, and he definitely had a vision, and from the beginning spelled out the vision, communicated, and all the things we're going to be talking about. By the way, that's not him. We're going to speak about all these things. You can look at that real quickly, and hopefully we'll cover the things that you're interested in. Options: stay or relocate. That's not the only two options. You could do both, really.
Or you can stay right where you are. You know, that's probably our first case study I think we're going to jump into, Jerry, if we want to go on to the next slide here. But staying may be an option. And sometimes even when you think it's not a good option, it can be. And I'll share with you an instance where it was. And of course, sometimes there when you're out of space, you've got to take care of that interim time period even before you relocate there and looking at that. And of course, here are some options there too in pulling the children or youth out of the main worship and starting that other service. Of course, he also is even having a remote location there in your fellowship center or so forth there to where you can actually have the pastor beamed in there, even though lots of times that's being done now for that interim so that the pastor can go down, make announcements, say in your fellowship center, get the service started there, then come to the main worship center there with it too, to either be an interim situation there or a permanent, depending on your situation. And then, of course, there are those times now where you have too much space, and there many times you're able to find other smaller congregations that would be happy to share that space with you and then merge 2 smaller churches there, of course, is a great alternative to help you in some tougher times. Now, I want to jump into, as Jerry mentioned, I own a civil engineering firm, and we've done a lot of churches. We do a lot of different things there, but also I've been the building committee chairman for about 15 years at First Baptist Arlington, Texas, which is right here in the center of the Metroplex. We're a downtown church. We had a great movement in our church to want to relocate. The new areas of town were down south. We were in the central downtown area. Pretty typical situation where downtown had really died. There wasn't much going on in the downtown area itself. And so we started exploring that. Well, our first one to talk to was the University of Texas at Arlington, which was our neighbor, because we thought, well, this would be great. They will buy our facilities and we can relocate and move on down south and get out of the dying downtown. Well, an interesting thing happened when we met with the president of the university and the vice president. They turned the tables on us. They said, hey, we don't want you to move. You're one of the few vibrant things going on downtown besides us, and we want you to be our neighbor. They helped us with parking. We entered into some new parking agreements there with that. And then, of course, the other thing that happened is that when we looked around, there weren't any other buyers for us, but we went to City Hall. We visited with the mayor, and we actually talked to him again about, we're thinking about moving. And normally you would, your City Hall would be sitting there saying, well, we'd like for y'all to move because we'd like to see a taxable use on your property. Have y'all heard that? Well, this mayor knew what we were doing in downtown because what little business was there, we were bringing in. Our church was busy 7 days a week. We're bringing people to downtown that are spending money in the restaurants and the stores that were in downtown. And then we started exploring, well, what is going to be happening here in downtown? And there were plans there to revitalize downtown. Well, that didn't convince our pastor too much at that time, but he said, let's explore it, because he had reservations about whether any of this could really take place. But then in our church leadership, we decided we're going to take a leadership role in downtown and try to help revitalize with the partners of the university and also City Hall to try and make a difference. Now, let me share with you some steps that we did. You look, let's go back. No, Jerry, if you can go the picture with all 3 buildings on it. Okay, we had a bank building here downtown, as I mentioned, was not doing very much. We had an opportunity to buy a 5-story bank building at a fraction of the cost of the market value. We said, well, if we're going to stay, let's go buy that building. It'll be great for church offices, education. We actually run a lot of our mission programs out of it. Then in addition to that, down here at the bottom picture, it's pretty small, but there was an old vacant Texas Utilities electric building that was between us and City Hall. Well, we had the vision, what can we do with that facility? Well, the city had money to go in and build a new pocket park somewhere in town. We ended up building a Levitt Pavilion that the city actually let us be on the design committee, and we now have an open-air pavilion amphitheater that we use for a lot of our programs, and then they program in concerts and so forth there on it, and it's been a very vibrant, but also it beautified the area there next to us, and they've been a great partner, and they actually work with us to make sure they don't have concerts during our service time. We share parking, and it's been a great opportunity for us too to be able to witness when the people come there. Another thing that happened is that already they were on the boards to build a new interchange that was on Center Street, which did not exist on Interstate 30, which is a connector between Dallas-Fort Worth. And when we started talking to the city, they said, we're trying to get funding for this, and that will give you an interchange that will link you to downtown. And instead of a 15 or 20-minute drive to downtown, you're going to have about a 7-minute drive, because you will have an exit that actually says downtown University of Texas at Arlington, and your congregation will be there. Well, it totally changed. We suddenly became a regional church. This bridge is open, and in fact, if you drive down Interstate 30 there, you will see these bridges. there that really made a difference. After they opened up, in addition to that, some of our dreams came about. We have had 8 new restaurants open within a few blocks of our church now. We also have had a new refurbishment of the Arlington Music Hall, which have live performances right down the way. Our downtown is growing, and if we had relocated, we would have missed out on that. But however, our church became a catalyst and a partner there with it, and perhaps one of the biggest wins. You know, many times churches are seen as not a very good partner with the city or others around. Well, because of our role there, we were actually approached by the president of the University of Texas and asked if he could buy some land for us. And he said, it's not really exactly a buy, it's a trade. He said, if we could have 1.5 acres of your property to put a parking garage on, we will give you 800 spaces for you to be able to use. There, the deal. Well, our master plan showed that we were going to put 100 spaces on that property on surface parking, and y'all know how hard it is to pay for parking garages. Well, that is open now. It opened here about a month ago, and it's been an incredible thing for us. There, again, partnerships and treating your neighbors well has turned into make our church not just a vibrant church, but a regional church now because of all these improvements. Doesn't always work that way, but the thing that I would caution you is before you relocate, check what is around you, check what the plans are, see what your neighbors think, and explore all options before you leave.
Another example of relocation, or really relocation, not relocation, a church in a downtown area that also wanted to stay is First Baptist Church, Fort Lauderdale. They were committed to the downtown area, and they only had 5, I think it was a total of 5 acres. And immediately, this is their, I don't know if you can see this right there, that's their sanctuary, lower left hand. And they're just right in the heart of downtown Fort Lauderdale. And downtown in Fort Lauderdale is not huge, but there is a downtown, and there's banks all around it and that sort of thing. And behind them, there's a bank right there, and there's 2 pieces of property, 2 acres of property that I told them that in the master planning that if they did what they wanted to do, build a 3,000-seat worship center right there, they needed parking. Right at the present moment, they were using the bank's parking lots and that sort of thing. But you can't always count the future that they will allow you to do that. So I said, you really need those 2 pieces of property, and they are owned by 2 developers. And they said, we've gone over the years, we've approached them, and they just will not sell to us. And I said, you need to try one more time. And they went back, and both of those developers made a deal with them right away. And so one thing that's really been cool about doing this kind of work, we see God's hand moving, and just, if you need the land and He wants you to have the land, you're going to have the land. And it's really cool they got that. And in the master plan, there's fellowship hall and education parking all back there. But this is a reality there, that 3,000-seat worship center. It can be accomplished. Main thing is, if you stay or relocate, that your ministry can be accomplished there. Sometimes you stay and just add services. At Brentwood, in Brentwood, Tennessee, we had done I think it was a 2,500-seat worship center, and they, over the 12 years we've worked with them and developed that master plan, they filled up this worship center. And one of the later phases was a connection center. It's a flat floor designed for 20-somethings. They have a service on Tuesday nights for people that are 20-something. They come for Bible study. I don't know what I'm getting here. What they've done now, there's a screen now in the center here that is a live broadcast or of the service going on in here. And happened to take a client into that room when they were testing that, and I was amazed. We walked in the door just when they were doing that, and walked in there and saw the pastor walk out on the stage, turn move forward. And I had to pinch myself to think that that was not really the pastor there. And it was very effective. So he may even come over, like you were talking about earlier, and say something personally to the congregation in that on-site satellite service. They'll have different music, but the pastor will be preaching at the same time to both services. So that's pretty cool. This room, by the way, is a flat floor, multi-purpose room that has stadium seating that rolls out and covers some of the floor, and it is a very effective multi-purpose type facility. Sometimes you will find the opportunity to buy a church that is going down and maybe dying. This is an example of a church that we worked with years ago that over the years has gone down, and the village church locally was able to buy them as they were as a satellite church, and then immediately they started growing again, put a pastor on site there, and that's worked real well. That works sometimes. We were relocating a church in Houston that wanted to make a total relocation, but they couldn't do it at the time because of the economy. To sell their existing facilities, it was not the time to do so. But they wanted to make a partial relocation. And they were going to do a family life center in the master plan. But now they wanted to have worship also, but they couldn't afford both. So this is a double gym, but they're separated like an L, with this area here during the week serving as a lobby and a control room with vision into these gyms, a wall that separates them, and then the platform up here. Saturday night, they open these walls up right there, and it becomes, during the week, a family life center, on Sunday, a worship center. So you can be creative and do something like that, but not make the total move, but start the move is the situation. Other churches just, decide they want to do satellite ministries. You can buy Walmart or a Home Depot. We've seen that many times. Or a ground-up facility like Firewheel here in Dallas. This was a Lake Point church satellite. My church in downtown Dallas, over the years, my first church project was for First Baptist Dallas, where we closed a street, built over the street, expanded the Truett building, 1920 building, remodeled it, and added to the top of it. Well, out of that, an interesting thing happened. We were able to do that because the street where we were going to use the air rights, we couldn't really support that building. One of the needs was to get more space in a building. Well, if it's absolutely packed out, how do you get more space in there? Well, we own both sides of the street, so I came up with the idea of, well, let's use the air rights. And went to the city, and that was okay. And the good news is, we told the committee, you can get 50 feet by 200 feet, 250 feet extra space in that building by doing this. The bad news is we can't support it. They said, what you don't know, and this is God working, what you don't know is the city of Dallas came to us a month ago, and they said they want to reroute the city streets in downtown Dallas, right in our area. And they want to put a street across our other property behind the Criswell building, and it separates some of our property. That sounds like it wouldn't be a good deal. But we'll give you San Jacinto and Patterson Street plus $350,000, and it's a done deal. And it just blew me away. That's God doing that. So that project happened and all, and what happened then later is that there's the street that was separated. We built a 1,200 car garage on that property. It's $5,000 per space. It's about a $5 million project. 1,200 cars, 2 ways in, 2 ways out, one-way traffic, angled parking for church use, glass-backed elevators. Everything was designed for church use, make it convenient. And then the pastor sold a piece of property to a high-rise developer. The land would support the high-rise, but not the parking. So they needed parking. We were $10 million in debt. So we sold the land and we sold the parking garage and air rights. We have air rights and 4 stories ability to build 4 more stories on that parking garage. And so the developer got the parking they needed. We still get to use the parking. We get all the revenue off the parking garage, which is a minimum of $1.2 million per year. This year it's $1.4 million into our budget. And we still use the garage. So that's a win-win deal for everybody. And the owner, the new owner of the garage, has come to us and wants to add 4 more floors to the garage. That'll add more income into the church. So that's pretty cool. Bottom line is, God really has a plan for these things, and you don't know what it is, but it's going to be cool seeing it. Now, fast forward a number of years, we didn't get the project, but the church now decided to not relocate. They feel like God's called them to be downtown, just like Arlington, forever. And we're right next to the Arts District. And the idea is we blew up, literally imploded, a full city block and a half in an instant. It was so cool. And then recreating the campus. Our old sanctuary that we're still worshiping in today is 1892. Beautiful building. It'll still be there. We'll still use it. But we have a new 3,000-seat worship center, a sky bridge going over to a new new education building and parking garage. So what we're seeing is a lot of churches are dying in downtown and things like that. Other churches like First Baptist Arlington, First Baptist Dallas are growing. And part of the key, I'm sure, is being in touch, the pastor being in touch with God, praying for the right solution. When he feels like he's got it, communicate it, all those things, and we'll get into that. But staying and doing nothing is not an answer. Please don't do that. We're really at a critical time in our country, you know that. And it's up to us. We've got opportunities now to make a difference, and that's what we need to do. Our pastor said when he came, by the way, he grew up in our church, has been gone quite a while, successful pastor, came back. When he came back, he says, I don't want to be a caretaker, and he certainly doesn't want to be an undertaker of our church. And we are growing again, and it's really fantastic. Another opportunity is, well, relocate. Why would you do that? Main thing is if you cannot provide the facilities and tools to do what your ministry is called to do, that's when you need to consider relocating. Mainly out of space, or maybe you've got too much space, like Jeff said. We've worked with churches that are dying and they have way more space than they need. Space is not the problem. Image, location may be the reason. If you can't accomplish your vision, that's when you should consider relocation. Overcrowded and portables, just not being able to do it. Now, it's exciting to be full, but if you continue to just be packed out, you're going to go down eventually. New people can't come, and they won't. You're trying to reach people, and that's not going to happen there.
And of course, all of us there are wanting to be successful and grow God's kingdom there, and it is a major decision on what to do and finding. And we're not saying that everyone is going to stay. We do want to talk about relocation, as Jerry said, because there are opportunities out there, but it's so critical that you study the pieces of land that may be options for you, study the demographics of the area, Study the transportation that is there now and may be planned for being there, because many times you can get a piece of property cheaper if the improvements are coming, and it's going to take you time to build your facility anyway. But study. You have to have the ability to get in and out of your church. That is so critical. You know, I do a lot of sports facilities, and we did Cowboy Stadium. People will walk a mile to get into a stadium. They will walk about 200 or 300 feet to get into a church. Sad, but that is exactly what we do, is draw circles around, and it's a different circle for a sports facility than it is a church. In addition to that, look at what the land is doing around you. What is around you? What are your neighbors? And then, of course, what are your situation with utilities and drainage? What is it going to cost you to develop on that site? You need all of those answers there, so that as you deliberate and pray and seek God's guidance in that, you have the information you need to. This is a picture of Prestonwood Baptist Church, a case study that we want to share with you. Jerry and his firm designed a state-of-the-art, beautiful 7,000-seat sanctuary here for one of the most vibrant churches in the Southwest, Prestonwood Baptist Church. If you haven't been there, you need to go. It is quite a place, but God had His hand on this church back in the 90s. They were a very successful, growing church that was in an urbanized area in North Dallas. And the pastor got the vision that, hey, we think we need to be a beacon as this metroplex grows north. The metroplex here is growing from 6 million to 9 million. And the biggest corridor that it's growing is just north of Dallas. Well, here you've got a successful church and great offerings, great opportunities, but yet the vision was to move. And so they hired Jerry. Jerry got me. We were looking for sites for them in a demographic area that was really growing, but there was still a lot of vacant land. And we found a site there that was going to have a major highway that was going to be about a mile away. We found a growing area. However, it was hard to convince them there of this site, because there was nothing around it except for one residential subdivision on the north. And when we went out to the site, tell them, Jerry, what was it called?
On the wall there, it said the Hills of Prestonwood. It's just like a sign. You know, what happened is Prestonwood Country Club, that was located closer to the old church, had another golf course out there, had there just north of this site. And they had a little subdivision there. The Hills of Prestonwood was the golf course. And that was just like, here we are, we're home. You know?
Yeah, what a sign from God when you go out there and here it is, Prestonwood Hills. They'd actually talked about we may need to change our name or something. We saw that. No, this is it. Now, I don't want to say that it was easy either. Here was our big hurdle. The church negotiated the land and was able to purchase 139 acres. The problem we had was many of the council members saw this as very lucrative commercial land. If nothing else, it would be high-end residential. So we had some convincing to do of council members that we were not going to be a bad economic investment here. We had to show them that we were going to be bringing so many people here and spending a lot of money in their city, and it was an uphill battle. Well, the thing that if you drive out there now, interestingly enough, the campus is fully developed, and around that campus are retail and other churches that have developed. It is a very vibrant commercial area, and Plano that we went into no longer says that. They appreciate it. In fact, they will be a great testimony for you if you're running into that opposition in your town, because Prestonwood turned out to be an economic catalyst for other development around them.
People have said, how big is that? 138 acres, 7,000 seats. How big is that? Said, well, it's in 3 cities and 2 counties. Have you ever done a church or had a church in 3 cities and 2 counties? That's what that property was. So Jeff had a job to negotiate with those 3 cities and 2 counties.
But it was pretty fun. And then in conclusion, here's another thing that happened on another church almost just right after this one. Fellowship of Las Colinas, which later became fellowship.com, was locating in a Irving Fine Arts Center, a small suburb here in the Metroplex, and they wanted to relocate. Prestonwood had just bought 139 acres. Well, we found 139 acres just north of the site for Fellowship Church. They went from running about 3,000 and they're running about 11 or 12,000 in their new facility now. Similar story where God was at work. Coincidence? I don't think so. I think it was very much God's plan there. But it is a step of faith there, because here was a church in Prestonwood that was doing extremely well, could have done well staying where they were at, but yet that vision now has led to an even larger congregation, and they also have done a satellite church to the north of them and Prosper, another growing area. So you never know what God may have in store. All right, developing the right master plan, next topic here in it. Very important there. We talked last night in a session about selection of the architect. Very critical that you have someone like Jerry that is very experienced in how churches work and how they need to be laid out. And of course, your team is critical there to take advantage of the piece of land and how your buildings are laid out, how your parking is, how your flow is. Because, as I mentioned before, you want your facilities to be tools that work for you and not against you, and convenience for your possible congregation to grow is so critical there, because making it easy to get in and out, making the flow good, and even creating the atmosphere there on the outside to then when you go into the buildings. Because as Jerry has preached many times to me, it's not when they enter the church house, it's from the time they get to the site from there on.
Right. There's vehicular traffic around the site, but also vehicular traffic on the site is important. And then that you can phase it, phase 1, 2, 3, without a lot of remodeling. So all of that goes back to real good master planning is so critical. And there's just a lot of considerations, and there's benefits, and there's also challenges in a relocation project. And catching that vision is, there's investigation that needs to be done, and there's a lot of ways to do that. Dream night, looking at what other churches have done, traveling, and it needs to be motivation, insightful, communication with those in the church to help them realize that you're not building for those that are there today. We did a relocation not too long ago, and the pastor asked when they were getting ready to vote, asked the people in the room, how many in the congregation were here when we built this building. It hadn't been that long that they had built the building that they were in, and about 2/3 of the room stood up and said they had come since they made that relocation to that site. So it's not for the people who are there, it's really for the people who are not there yet. Be inclusive, involve the staff, interview the staff. It's important to interview the staff that actually hands-on with the children and the youth and all of that. Lay leadership, be sure you have their support. There's a lot of ways to do that. And then communication and getting the vision there to be adopted and by the congregation. It's got to be their vision as well. I'll just say selecting the building committee is real important. We won't go into that very much, but getting the right people on the bus, so to speak, there. Experience tells us also there will be situations you will lose membership. There are some that you'll lose. You'll gain much more than you lose. But you just got to realize that there will be a loss of some people. They may not want to go where you're going. It may be closer. We've seen situations like First Baptist Orlando. When we relocated them, they were in a downtown situation. It's kind of interesting. A lot of the people that paid to make the relocation successful actually kind of thought, we don't want to relocate. We like this church. And they had to buy the church from the church in a way. So there's a downtown First Baptist Orlando. I don't know what they call themselves. But then First Baptist Orlando, we relocated to a 150-acre site. So there's a little friction there. There will be problems, but now there's a church downtown and there's a church out there. They're both successful.
Let me mention too, Prestonwood there in their relocation, they were moving, about 10 or 12 miles from where they were, so it was a major move. They weren't going to be keeping, the same neighborhoods there. But the pastor, Jack Graham, was very wise in the fact that he spent a lot of time in talking about the mission of the church and how they were moving to the people, and that they really needed the people of the neighborhood that had been driving for a few blocks to their church to realize that, hey, we still need you, and it is going to be an inconvenience to you, but just think about it, driving to the mission field here with it. And then in addition to that, those building committee members were ambassadors. They went out and shared with that. And like Jerry said, instead of pouring gasoline on the fire that they're relocating out, they put water on those fires and told them about the great plans and the ability to minister that much more. It's important to bring that congregation together, and you can minimize the amount of loss that you have there in not throwing the people away that you're moving away from.
You will hear, the congregation, there will be people who bicker, and say, why are we doing this? They don't understand yet. And, our pastor told us, you're carrying 2 buckets here. You've got gasoline in one and water in the other. When you see those things, pour water on it. Don't pour gasoline. That's your opportunity to communicate with them and explain why unity is important and that this will be successful. But you see the things there. There's memorials that people say, I was baptized there, I was married there. My stained glass, I gave that stained glass, our name's even on it, and things like that. And that is important. I mean, it is special, those places and those times and those memories. But that's not really what we're about. We're really about reaching people for Christ.
And of course, I've seen Jerry too use a lot of those things and recreate them in the new facility. Take some of that stained glass that's so critical, that garden that's been created, recreate it, make it bigger and better, and still paying tribute to your legacy there in your church. Getting ready, the financial component. Here I'm going to talk about it as a building committee chairman. You need great financial information there for you so that you have a basis, even a basis for what to pray for. But the financial component is another very important one to analyze what is it going to cost you to move. What can you do on your facility? And of course, generally, other churches are your best source to buy your facility. But also making sure that you research all of the costs that you can, and then of course your ability to raise money. Now that is based on financial models, and firms like Jerry's have those models and they can do it. And then of course you've got to pray about the spiritual part of that. How much more can you do? But you need that basis of, say, if I can raise $50 million or $15 million, this is what the projections say. And then through prayer, God will reveal to you what you can raise there in it, but you need to identify all of those costs and be very diligent here in working out your financial model. Other way. I give you an idea too of many times you may be able to have cash on hand there that you may be able to get some things started so that it can be visible there to you. For instance, if you're going to stay in a location, you think, well, I'm going to have to enter into a capital campaign. Well, you may have some sources of money to where you can actually jumpstart some of those projects so your congregation can see the difference there in what you're doing. For instance, it's not too expensive to go into your fellowship center and outfit it with the latest AV and actually have your satellite service there at the same location, but yet allow you the ability to expand. And that it can be a great thing, or perhaps the remodeling of a youth center or a children's building there with it so that you can generate that excitement. And then the other thing that you really need, several years ago, we needed to redo our carpet, paint. We had our central plant we needed to update. those were not very fun things to go ask for money for. But what we also needed, that we added to the project, we needed a welcome center. We had a very small 60s, style welcome center. We were having multiple services. We needed ponding area for our people to be able to move in and out of those services and to be able to visit and fellowship together. Well, that piece of the puzzle there actually allowed us to raise money for those things that were not so fun to raise money for. And our program was very successful because they could see the need for the Welcome Center. And it's kind of funny, they never mentioned that we were paying for paint or carpet. They all said, well, our Welcome Center deal really made a difference. Fellowship, that's right. So it's important when you structure your building program to have some very popular things in the program.
There will be a lot of challenges coming down the way. A lot of them just maintaining unity. That's what we talked about, the two buckets. Go back to our church downtown. I cannot believe the unity that our church has. We have gone from flipping our sequence of services. I used to go to the 8 o'clock service. Now I go to Sunday school at 8, go to worship at 9:30. There's a lot of that. That's enough to split some churches. I remember when we changed from 8:10 to 8 o'clock was a big deal. You would think 10 minutes wouldn't make that much difference, but those kind of things can be a big deal. Just tearing down a block of buildings, that could split churches. So think about a block and a half of education space that suddenly is gone. Of course, we need all this new space. Well, it's not there yet. So that means where you had a room that young marrieds say could use, that's their room, so to speak. First Baptist Dallas really spoiled over the years with all the space that we had. And everyone had a kitchen, everyone had their own furnishings and all this. Well, you can't always do that. You've got to be multi-purpose, you've got to share, you've got to learn to share. We've done all of that and there's no bickering at all because they see the vision. They see it coming up out of the ground and they know God's in it and they caught the vision. And it's communicated over and over again. You were going to say something.
Well, you just, in actually showing that vision too, one of the great ways now is taking advantage of technology. I think it's very important to get your architect on board so that he can do some preliminary cost estimates and also so that he can model some conceptual plans, because they actually, with the 3D modeling now, it can actually share, even the layman who generally has trouble visioning things, they can actually see what it might look like. They can make it look like it's already there in the computer modeling.
It's amazing.
Great tool to sell there when you're entering into a capital campaign.
All of these things listed up there are things, and there will be bumps in the road. There just will be, and Satan is going to attack where he can. And even if it wasn't him, there'd be bumps in the road. Architects are not perfect, for sure. Contractors are not. Consultants are not. And owners are not. So you got a ton of different disciplines and people coming together. And there can be problems. It can be the most fun thing in the world, or it can be a nightmare. And I've seen the whole spectrum of that. We hope this has been good, and that I want to open it up for any questions that you all have. We've gone actually faster than I thought we would, so that's good. Yes?
You made a comment about tearing a bunch, obviously, a block and a half of your footage down. What are you doing in the interim to keep those programs and those?
That's a good question. For our children, the space, the old 1920 Truett building that was immediately behind our sanctuary that we remodeled. I told you about building over the street and all that. I got to see my own buildings torn down, And the children's space, we have remodeled that several times and all. Well, when they tore all that down, the last building we did was an education building. It didn't have a lot of space in it. It had fellowship hall, called Center Stage and some education space. And there was one unfinished floor in there, and they took that space and made it children's space, and they hired a theming person to theme it. In other words, they spent pretty good money, even though knowing we were have $130 million to raise and all. That's one of the things I've seen, you know, doing things with excellence. Excellence draws people. If you try and say, I'm just going to be so tight and we can't afford this and we can't afford that, be very careful to let people see we're doing this in a positive way, you know, with excellence. People are really going to be attracted to that.
Another thing that I've seen done is your median adults are your most mobile. You know, your young marrieds want to stay near the children and be there. Senior adults, you've got those issues. But many times I've seen median adults being moved to close perimeters, either in shopping centers. For us, there in Arlington, we have rented space from University of Texas at Arlington for our median adults to meet into, and then we move children into those classrooms there in the interim as we've been remodeling. But I think the median, and then the median adults too seem to understand. And you know, when it's a finite period of time, that's usually the group that you can work and move them a little more remote than other age groups.
Now, in our situation, senior adults are across the street. We're on the 9th floor of the Spurgeon Harris building. Can you imagine, you know, some of them are in walkers and all of this. And there are some that are not, they're going to Sunday school because we have parking garage right there. You can park, get on the elevator, go to your education. But it is difficult. We've got 3 classes using all those rooms. So you've got an 8 o'clock, a 9:30, and 11. So there's people, and the elevators are not, that's a 1950 type building built for the IRS. And those elevators, they're not the greatest. And seems like people are crowding in to wait, to go up, to come down. You know, it's pretty exciting. You see a lot of people you've never seen before, you know. But you're in a walker or whatever, you know, but they're not complaining. Some of them cannot make it. We've got one fella in our Sunday school class, and it's not labeled senior adult or forerunners or whatever. It's multi-age, but probably the majority are the older, but there's some young school age, college age in there as well, because we have a really good Bible teacher. But there's one fella that was fought in World War II at Iwo Jima. He's the toughest guy I ever saw. He's 90-some years old. He fell a couple times recently, and I mean, his face was just black and blue. He looked like Muhammad Ali had just beat him up, you know. There he was every Sunday, you know, black and blue or not. And he walks across and makes it to worship. So, you know, doing all those things about communicating the vision, sharing the vision, capturing the vision, and then being a part. The giving helps you be a part. Doesn't matter how much you give, you're going to be a part if you participate. I know when we did that first building, it was called the Mary C. building. Well, she paid for a big part of that, and it's not nearly as good for someone to pay for most of the building than everyone having a part. So that financial aspect, and you'll probably say yes on that as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What else? Other question? Yeah. No, you can't. No.
Most of your content is regarding, I think, the context of churches that are established and maybe grown to a point
Right.
or have decayed to a point where they've got to make decisions about facilities. Can you speak a little bit to new church plants and what options are available? When is it appropriate to lease and invest in construction costs for a space that you don't own versus trying to invest and save and be tight on
You know, there's probably a different plan for every different church. I do know my son was an associate youth pastor in Lubbock, Texas, and he and the youth pastor started a church. He was on staff there for a long time, and They started in a lease center. They just leased what they could afford. And then as they grew, they were able to, obviously people could see they got a little more space and more. Then they went to a school shared their space with them. Then they were able to buy some property way on the outside of Lubbock. There was nothing hardly out there. They wanted to buy 10 acres, were able to, and I suggested they get a first right of refusal on 2 more 10-acre pieces where they would have the opportunity for 30 acres. They did that, and not long after that, when they moved and built on that 10 acres, they added the 2 more. Now it's all built around them, and you just, use your brain and do your research and all that, and God's going to show you the way.
I can give you 2 other models here that I was involved in. We had a pastor of a very established church in Birmingham, Alabama, that felt led, along with a very good friend, to relocate to Frisco, Texas. That is one of the fastest growing cities in America. And they opened up in the local mall, in the movie theater there. They said the people are used to coming to the mall. There's plenty of parking. The movie theater actually had a Christian that was managing that, and he gave them a great rate. They actually were able to take some vacant space and create a nursery there out of it. The church grew, and then they ultimately ended up buying a manufacturing office warehouse that they retrofitted now, and it's a very vibrant church there. And of course, as the offering grew and as their resources grew, they did that. And the reason I was involved in it is when they moved here, they didn't know anybody. They knew a few people scattered around. Well, they formed a what they called their board of elders, and none of us were members of that church, but we each had a different kind of expertise there, and also we were prayer warriors for them and helped them raise money there as they got started. So I thought that was very wise on their part. And then, of course, as the church grew, they were able to form their own board of elders there for their church. Another one that started at community centers. We talk about schools all the time. Well, this one particular church start there actually found a better price at a community center. And it was an old community center, but interestingly enough, it had a stage. They had storage area, and it worked out very well for them. And then finally, they've outgrown it, and they just bought a Gold's Gym that had failed, got a great price on it, and went in and retrofitted it there. So you see these shopping center fits all the time. And then I'll share another story with you is sometimes you don't plan on moving, but my future son-in-law he's a youth minister at a church that was approached by a church that was doing very well. His church was doing very well, but they offered an exorbitant price for his facility. And they went over and bought a shopping center and were able to remodel that shopping center and then pocket about $2 million there. And it really helped jumpstart their campus. So you never know when somebody may be approaching you.
Well, in Walmarts, you see them building super Walmarts and things like that. Handy Dan or these kind of Lowe's or whatever. Something like that is a good opportunity to see that they might sell it very inexpensively. We did a Walmart in Pampa that they were able to buy very inexpensively. And sometimes auto dealerships make opportunity. So you just look around for facilities and good buys. And sometimes you'll find people that are very, cooperative toward churches and helpful to churches. They want to help, so you never know.
This gentleman's point on the smartness of investing a lot of money in the strip center is an example. When we planted a church, in our church, I attend Southeast Christian in Louisville, we have 25,000 members, and we do satellites, and we just did one independent freestanding on the other side of the river. And the other one we just did was in a shopping center, and I had the same question. Why in the heck would they spend $5 million to retrofit this old Winn-Dixie and expand it when they don't even know? It's only on a 5-year lease. The key is make sure, if you can, see if you can get an option to buy it. Beside the renewals, get an option to buy it, and that'll at least give you the ability to recoup your investment down the road. But do the demographics, see how many members that you currently have going to the old location that are coming from, where you're looking at planting. They actually went to those members, surveyed them, and then got commitments from 300 members to say, we will commit to going to this church for at least 2 years. So you had an instant...
That's a great point.
It's an instant campus that you had a commitment from your current members that would go there. They simulcast the preacher on Saturday night plus the Sunday services, and they've got their own live worship there. And right now, they're averaging close to 2,000 in less than a year at that campus. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Another thing I saw Dr. Crispell do a lot or talk about a lot is if you sell something, have a clause in there that in 100 years or 50 years or whatever, it comes back to the church. So that's really long-term planning, but it can pay off for your grandkids.
We're a very young, small startup church. How important is it to get an architect involved because we're in the process of looking for land or trying to buy an existing building or whatever?
Well, if it's the right architect, you need to get them involved very early because it doesn't cost you any more, and there's a lot of experience if you get an architect. I say right, meaning an experienced one. There's a lot of really good church architects out there. Back in about 1980 or so, I didn't know very many architects that did what we did, and we were new at it. But now there are, and you really need to do that. It's so comprehensive what they get involved in.
The title of this still, location, 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 that is so critical. And you need the help of an expert there. You do not want to make a mistake on where you relocate.
We have the same viewpoint as far as the contractor. We don't want to bring them on immediately, but as soon as we get something you can look at and start seeing what opportunities and options you have, it's excellent to bring the contractor on board, and our consultants will come on board with us. So it's real important.
Right over here, Jerry.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't see you.
I was going to speak to that. I'm an architect, and what we do oftentimes on church projects is that we will have delayed billings, and we won't charge them for any pre-bond or kind of pre-building work until something's actually done. Because some of the church projects we work with, they're smaller churches, they don't have the money
Absolutely.
to pay a design professional up front. And so to provide those services so they have a good comprehensive holistic view.
So ultimately you actually get paid.
Yeah, it's deferred. And,
Yeah.
But then sometimes just that upfront hurdle is enough to have somebody not want to.
Exactly. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah.
Throw it out there. I was just going to ask, are there any architectural firms you're aware of who would upfront do kind of just
I think most would.
a study without fee?
Well, a lot of times we'll go into an interview and we'll show, you can now, technology's allowed a lot. You can use Google Maps and Google the sites that you're talking about and lay some sketches over there and begin to communicate as if, we typically will communicate as if we already had the project. How would we start looking at it before we really went through the programming and all? So you look at the site and look at where people would come from and the flow internally and things like that.
I want to go. I just wanted to speak as a building committee chairman. It's awful tempting to go to an architect that's within your church, and they're a great resource, but I would highly recommend that you go out and find an architect that is very experienced in church work, that is used to that, because you will be helping. The architect in your church may not realize it at the time, but it's great for them to volunteer. But if things go wrong and so forth, it's probably one of the toughest things that can happen there is if you have an architect that's a member of your church and things go bad.
Any other questions, comments? All right. Hope y'all enjoyed this. We thank you for coming.
Thank you.